Hello, everyone. Ian Hamilton with Good Virtual Reality here, joined by a developer that I've been talking to for a couple of years now. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Rafael, and I am one of the co-founders of Not Suspicious and CEO.
And where are you calling in from today?
Today I'm calling in from Finland. Last time we spoke, I was still in Malta. Banners and Bastions did not exist, and Meta was still trying to push Horizon Worlds. So that was in January of last year.
Yeah, a lot of things have changed. Start at the beginning here in your path into VR. When did you first experience VR, or when did you first hear about it?
So the first time I experienced VR was actually here in Finland as well, around 2013. I came here for an exchange. I was living in Kajaani in the center of Finland, and I think the university got one of the development kits for the Rift. And I had heard about the Kickstarter, and it caught my attention. But there's always a lot of like scams with Kickstarter and so on. So I was like, all right, we'll wait a little bit and see how this pans out. Then the university got a development kit, and I tried it. It was still a bit gimmicky at the time, but I could see that it was sort of like going somewhere. Just to backtrack a little bit, I was doing my bachelor's degree in game design at that time. This was in 2013. My original university is in Portugal, where I am from originally. I'm Portuguese, but I learned about this program called Erasmus, and I wanted to do an exchange, so I ended up going to Finland. When I got to Finland, apparently they had already experienced success of Angry Birds here. The mobile games industry was sort of like taking off here in Finland at that time, and I didn't know anything about mobile games when I came to Finland. I was just like making computer games. I didn't really know anything about. I didn't even have a smartphone. So I got here and bought a smartphone. I started building mobile games, and so that's what I was doing at that time, at that particular time. And of course, on the side, I also had another project. My original first game business was a MMORPG that I built with a very talented Dutch programmer, Sander, and it's still live. But I left in around 2017, 2018 when I started Not Suspicious. It's wartail.com if anyone wants to check it out. So that's how I was sort of like paying for college, because when I graduated high school in 2010, my parents were like already struggling a little bit with the financial crisis that hit us. The 2008 financial crisis like hit us pretty strongly here in Europe, and in particular for my parents. I couldn't afford to pay like the yearly tuition to go to college at that time, which was only like 700 euros. So looking back, it's like ridiculous. 700 euros a year, and I couldn't afford that. So I took like a gap year, and that's when my cousin told me like, oh, remember that like really old game we used to play when we were kids? Like there's a Dutch programmer that's like trying to reverse engineer it, and is like gonna like bring it back and so on. So I basically got in touch. Like I went to the online forum that my cousin sent me. I got in touch with the programmer. I started like sharing my ideas, and so that's how I sort of like developed my game design chops. It was on Wartail basically, and so that's sort of like the vehicle that I was using for paying my tuition and for going to Finland and so on and so forth. And then after I graduated, I did an internship for a company called Cool Games in Amsterdam, where I did more mobile game stuff. And on the side, I was always doing this MMORPG as well. So I was doing this MMORPG and mobile game stuff this whole time. But then by 2016, I started feeling like, I've been doing this MMO for basically 6 years now. The mobile games industry, I was sort of like, I wasn't really enjoying it. So I remembered my experiences with VR. I remembered when I had first tried it, and I was like, well, let's look at how VR is doing again. And that was precisely the year that the Rift came out, the CV1, the consumer version of the Rift came out, and without even controllers, just an Xbox controller and so on. And I was like, okay, well, this could be interesting. I had finished my internship in Amsterdam, and I was back in Portugal. I was working for a company called Lisbon Works. They were also doing games. In my mind, I was like, I should probably figure out a way to go and stay for a few years to one of these countries where VR is really taking off, and there were two sort of like main candidates in my mind. It was the United States and China. In retrospect, I now realize that if I had gone to China, I would have been doing like hardware as opposed to software. So I googled how to go to each of these countries. And it turns out there was like this program called the Fulbright program that would sponsor like graduate studies in the United States if I wanted to do that. So I applied for the Fulbright program, and they gave me a scholarship, and I ended up going to the United States, in particular to Orlando, Florida, where I did my master's at the Florida Interactive Entertainment Academy, which is part of the University of Central Florida. As soon as I got to Florida, I immediately started prototyping VR ideas because I didn't have access to any VR hardware back in Portugal, and in fact, like Meta did not even ship to Portugal for the longest time. I could have moved back to the Netherlands or some other country in Europe and then ordered the VR there and stuff. But I was like, well, why not just go to the source, right? The academic environment was also a great choice because then I didn't have any constraints with regards to what I had to prototype, right? It's, I'm doing a master's degree. I can just prototype whatever I want. And one of those prototypes that I put together with a couple of my classmates in September or October of 2017 was Tablecraft. Tablecraft was and is this science sandbox where you play with the periodic table of elements. It started just because I wanted to learn how to design for an immersive environment. Some of the constraints I had was I didn't want to have like artificial locomotion, so it was very much along those lines of like Job Simulator, where you stay in one place and you interact with the environment around you. The game sort of comes to you. After I built Tablecraft, the Florida Interactive Entertainment Academy, sometimes they would have like these tours of like nearby school children that would come over and just tour the academy to sort of like learn about game development, and so that they understood that like game development was a valid career choice for their future and so on. And the university would always ask me, can you just demo Tablecraft? Because I guess they really liked it. And the kids would always go nuts for Tablecraft. They would have to force them out of the headset because they loved it so much. And so that's when I first realized, okay, well, there might be something here. So I at that point I was like, okay, I don't have any funding. I'm literally a foreigner here in the United States. My time is like limited. I had, maybe 2 years before I had to go back because my master's degree was just 18 months. And so I was like, okay, well, I should probably look into how to stay a bit longer and how to sort of like try to finance a company, perhaps. I went to the executive director of the building there, like the University of the Florida Interactive Entertainment Academy, Ben Dole, great guy. He was one of the devs on Ultima Online. He was the former chief operating officer of Electronic Arts in Austin. And I went to him and I was like, Ben, if you sponsor like a Florida Interactive Entertainment Academy booth at the Games for Change conference that's going to happen in New York, I will go there with Tablecraft and I will make sure the university looks great. So he was like, all right, well, I'll think about it. And then, a few weeks later, he came back and he was like, okay, I'll get you a booth. You just have to get your own flights. You have to figure out the accommodation by yourself and so on, but I'll sponsor the booth. And so the university sponsored the booth. I went there with Tablecraft, and I happened to meet this guy that worked for the government there called Edward Metz. Amazing guy. I don't think he works for the government anymore, but he was working for the Institute of Education Sciences, which is I think it's a branch of the Department of Education or something. He essentially was working like for the Department of Education. And I gave him a demo of Tablecraft, and he was like, wow, guys, this is amazing. You should totally apply for this grant, the Small Business Innovation Research Grant. And I was telling him like, well, I'm a foreigner. I don't think that's going to be feasible and so on. He was like, no, just make sure you get like an American co-founder and everything will work out. So around that time, I already had my classmate Guillaume helping out with Tablecraft, but he wasn't fully on board until we had this opportunity to get like up to $1 million from the government for this project. And it seemed like the representative that we had met, he loved it. So we thought, okay, there might be a good chance here. So I was like, look, we start Not Suspicious. We go after this grant, and we use Tablecraft as sort of like our stepping stone for breaking into the VR space, and then we'll go from there, basically. And so that's what we did in September of 2018. We created Not Suspicious, and in December of that same year, we applied for a SBIR grant from the National Science Foundation, as well as one from the Department of Education. The Department of Education one was in January. And then in July of the next year, so in July of 2019, we got the phase one from the NSF, from the National Science Foundation. We got $225,000 to sort of like develop a pilot for tablecraft, and the premise was we were going to try to figure out how to bring VR learning to the classroom sort of at scale, and without, with minimal VR hardware requirements. So we wanted to design it such that, as long as you have one VR headset, you bring that one VR headset to the classroom, and then everyone else would be able to join this, join the same instance with their phones or their tablets or their Chromebooks or whatever, and the teacher would be able to monitor what the VR user is doing and so on and so forth. That was the whole premise, so that's how we started. That's how Not Suspicious started.
How did the idea for Airspace Defender come together, and when did you start working on it?
In early 2024, I reached out to my contact at Oculus Start, Rita. Shout out to Rita, by the way. She's awesome. She's amazing. And I asked her, could you send me a Quest 3? I just flat out asked her, could you send me a Quest 3? Because I would like to try out the mixed reality and the hand tracking stuff. And she got back to me and she was like, I could send you a Quest Pro. And I was like, no, I don't want a Quest Pro. I have a Quest Pro already, and it's not very good. So I'll just wait until you guys can send me a Quest 3. And she never replied to that email, but a few months later, I got a Quest 3 in the mail. I tried this amazing app by Zach Reed called Piano Vision. So I actually went on Amazon and I bought like an 81 key like foldable piano just so I could like try it out, try to connect to the headset and to see how did this app work, Piano Vision. And to my surprise, it worked really well. Very quickly, within like 15 minutes of trying Piano Vision, I was playing songs, and I was shocked by that. Like, I was like, okay, this is basically the future. This is like the Matrix thing where you download Kung Fu onto your brain or whatever. And so, yeah, at that time, I was completely sold on mixed reality. Piano Vision basically sold me on mixed reality. And then shortly after that, like, Rita reached out again via email, and she said, we're going to be hosting this hackathon, the Meta offices in New York, and we'll fly you out if you want, get you the accommodation and so on. And I was like, okay, well, that sounds great, actually. That's a great opportunity. This was 2024. She reached out like in March or something. Then I reached out to Guillaume, who at this time was already taking a break from Not Suspicious for a few years. He was just working on a flat, because Guillaume, my co-founder at Not Suspicious, he's never been as interested in this medium as I am. Like, he's really, when he went to the Florida Interactive Entertainment Academy where I met him, his goal was to just become a game developer. Like, he's just a gamer. He loves games. Whereas I went there specifically to get access to VR hardware and so on, and become sort of an XR developer. And so Guillaume had already taken a break from tablecraft. He was gone for a few years, but I reached out back to him and I told him, look, man, there's like this Quest 3 now. They have, it's pretty interesting technology. Pass-through is like pretty decent. The hand tracking is decent, and in a few years we might have augmented reality glasses. So would you like to come to this hackathon in New York with me? And then I went to John, our 3D artist, and I did the same thing. And, I pitched basically. I pitched Guillaume, John, and James, three people, and they all came with me to New York for this hackathon at Meta's offices. So when we got there, we were sort of like brainstorming, okay, what can we develop for these hypothetical future AR glasses? So it has to be, let's do something that's like fully focused around hand tracking, so no controllers. Let's do something that is like pass-through native, right? So let's not like bother with the VR stuff for now. Let's just do like something that's like fully in pass-through. And let's do something that doesn't take much of a field of view, because the field of view is going to be constrained in these eventual, hypothetical AR glasses that we'll have in the future. We're not going to have this wide field of view that we have today, at least not initially. And simultaneously, I was also interested in a type of gameplay that would push hand tracking to its limits. I wanted fast gameplay. Like, I remember prompting the team, like, it would be good if the gameplay was like really fast, so that we could just sort of like have this sort of benchmark for the quality of hand tracking, in the same way that like Beat Saber was the benchmark for controller tracking at Oculus. I wanted to understand, okay, like, how fast can the gameplay be in hand tracking? And of course, this was at a time when we were all skeptical of hand tracking. Like, I remember it was I don't know if the Apple Vision Pro had already come out in 2024 or if it had already been announced or something. But if it hasn't, it probably was like shortly after or something. And I remember there was a lot of people were like, "What? No controllers? How are we going to build any games for it?" And so on and so forth. And so in my mind, I was like, "Well, it has to be possible to design games for hand tracking." And so we were there at the hackathon, and Guillaume mentioned Missile Command. Like he mentioned the point and click mechanics of Missile Command. And as soon as he told me that, like everything clicked for me as well. Because of course, like the point and click mechanics, yes, that's a great fit. Missile Command, yes, it's a cool idea. But also in my mind, uh, I was like, of course, like that's a perfect fit for this medium because Missile Command itself is an abstraction. Like it's a 2D version of uh, warfare, which is 3D in the real world. And so I was like, okay, so we can now actually create like a 3D version essentially of Missile Command, which is going to be much closer to, to what warfare actually looks like in the real world. We built it in a couple of days. There at the hackathon, we didn't win. We were not even in the top 3 or anything like that. But we were one of the very few apps to come out of the hackathon that actually got published.
All right. I want to talk about Banners and Bastions, which is your most recent game and your path to building that.
So after Guillaume and I shipped Airspace Defender, we started like brainstorming. Okay, what could be some of the next projects that we have this thread on our Discord called Future Game Ideas. So basically, ideas for future games that we might want to develop. And one of those ideas that I had pitched to Guillaume in one of our calls was a game called Bad North. So there's this game on Steam, fantastic game, and I think they're also on the Epic Store, called Bad North. I think actually it might be, I could be totally wrong here, but I think it might be by the same developer who did Townscraper. And it's a great game, great little game. I had that in the back of my mind because Guillaume and I wanted to do something with deeper strategy after Airspace Defender. And someone reached out to us on LinkedIn and they sent a video of this very bare bones prototype that they had developed at the time, but that I could already tell was inspired by Bad North. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh my God, these guys are like literally building the thing that I want to build. And so this was Sahand, who is from Iran, and his team. They had a mobile games company, and apparently they were doing quite well in the mobile game space. But again, they, like me many years before, they were feeling like mobile games are not really the thing that they want to be doing for much longer because it's sort of like a little bit of a race to the bottom, and it's a weird space to be in if you want to do interesting game design. And so then in January, before I even met them, in January of 2025, they started working on this little prototype for a strategy game inspired by Bad North. And then in March of 2025, they sent me a little video on the Not Suspicious LinkedIn where they basically explained that they're inspired by what Guillaume and I had done with Airspace Defender. And and so in that video, they already had like a little dome. Like I could see that they already had like the Airspace Defender dome, and they had like the pinch and drag mechanics where you just grab the banner and move the banner around. And I was like, okay, I see what you guys are doing. So I asked Guillaume, do you want to be involved in this? And it was like, no, I'm gonna go back to my flat games. Basically, Guillaume once again was like, well, I'm not really interested in the VR space. So he took another break and got a job at Blizzard. And so I reached out to Sahan and I was like, look, I'm very interested in what you guys are doing. Let's work on it together. Though, of course, that was very naive because when he sent the video, I didn't even realize that he was from Iran. But then, like within a few days, I realized, oh God, these guys are all from Iran. And his team is, so it's Sahan, it's Pardis, his wife, and also our 3D artist, and then there was Alireza and Amir. So it's a team of 4. So yeah, in March they reached out, they sent that video, and then I proposed to them, let's work on it together informally. Of course, we can't have any. Not Suspicious is a US based business. We can't necessarily really be working with Iranians. There's export controls. There's sanctions essentially. And so I was like, well, look, we're gonna like just have this informal collaboration thing where where you and I will just sort of like informally work on this project, but there's no money will ever exchange hands. We're not gonna have any contract signed. We're not gonna have any of that stuff until I manage to bring you guys to Europe. And so yeah, they agreed, and we started working full time together on Banners and Bastions. So yeah, we were doing that, and then in June of last year, just as we were getting the early access build ready for release, which came out later in August, I think we were probably working on the Upload VR Summer Showcase video as well at that time. Just as we were doing that, the first bombs started dropping there in Tehran in what became known as the 12-day war, where Israel and the US bombed the nuclear sites in Iran, and but also there was one ordnance that fell like within a couple hundred meters of where the team was working in Tehran, like just within like I don't know, like 500 meters or something of where they were working. So then they left Tehran at that time, and they went to another town nearby, which was a little bit more quiet. And yeah, and it was a challenge because apparently every time there's something like this, then there's a communications blackout. So I lost touch with them for some time. But luckily at that time, it was only a 12-day thing, and they didn't bomb Tehran that much, just a little bit. And so we managed to sort of come out in early access. Then we kept updating it. We kept releasing updates, and Banners and Bastions came out of early access in December. Of course, all of it just published by Not Suspicious, and the team this whole time working completely unpaid, nothing, no money changed hands, no agreements, nothing in place, just complete trust. They just completely trusted me that I would not screw them over. And yeah, with the game that they had been working so hard on. It's quite amazing in retrospect to think about. Yeah, and then we started filing paperwork. I wrote a few recommendation letters for them. Like they started looking into how can we like relocate the entire team to Europe so that we can, so that I can like pay them and we can like make the whole thing official, right? They had a couple of options, the Netherlands and Finland. And when they told me Finland, I was like, oh, you guys should actually go to Finland. Finland is a great country. And if you guys get accepted to go to Finland, I will move there as well. So, of course I had to pitch it to my partner as well, Agatha, and I was like, would you be okay if we move to Finland so that I can like work in person with the team if they get accepted and so on? And she was very supportive of that. And yeah, Agatha and we moved to Finland in February, at the end of February 26th. I think the team got accepted on February 27th. So like their residence permits got approved on February 27th to come to Finland. And then on February 28th, the current war broke out in Iran. So I lost all communications with them for, basically for the vast majority of the time that the war was ongoing, and it's still ongoing. Yeah, and right now we still cannot get in touch with some of the people that are still there. So earlier this month, Sahant and Pardees, two of my teammates, they started the journey to come here. They took a bus in Iran. That was like a 20-hour bus ride all the way to the border with Armenia. Then they had to cross to Armenia on foot. And then from there, once they got to the capital, Yerevan, they got on a flight to Istanbul. And then from there, they flew to Helsinki, where I went, and I just picked them up a few days ago. I'm super relieved that part of the team is finally here. They're very they're very happy to be here, safe and sound. And we are just now restarting. We're just trying to get in the flow again of doing the things that we were trying to do. Because at the time when they started getting bombed, we were brainstorming a new project. We were going to start a new project, but I think that the timing on that now has been pushed back a little bit, and we're probably just going to try to focus a little bit on Banners and Bastions and Airspace Defender again, and see if we can like release some updates there, just to give us a little bit more of a safety net before we try to gamble again on like a new project. Yeah, and today, Monday, April 20th, one of our other teammates and his wife, so Alireza and his wife, they just began the same journey. So they just got on a bus today, and they're gonna go to the border with Armenia. Then they're gonna cross on foot Then they're going to go to Turkey, and then from there, fly to Helsinki, where I will pick them up on Thursday, hopefully, if everything goes according to plan. And yeah, and then there's still one last person over there in Iran that we'll see if we can, we'll have to file some more paperwork for them as well. But yeah, it's been a challenge. It's been a challenge. Of course, I can't speak for them. Obviously, they've had it much worse, right? Because they were the ones actually getting bombed. But it's definitely been a challenge to try to ship Banners and Bastions and try to continuously update it and so on.
So, did you go to Finland to meet with them? Was that the
Yeah,
plan all
yeah,
along?
yeah. I moved here on purpose so that I could be here to welcome them to Europe. Basically, yeah. My partner and I, Agatha and I, we moved here, and we were staying with friends. We're sort of like subleasing the upper floor of a house from some of my friends that live here in Finland, we moved here literally on purpose to just be here when the team finally comes. And yeah, I'm glad they finally did, because it's been great. I've been showing them around, and well, at least part of the team has arrived, and yeah, it's I can't express just how happy and grateful I am that they actually are safe. And yeah, and now hopefully we can like officialize everything and roll them into Not Suspicious officially, and and hopefully they can start getting their story out there as well, which previously they couldn't, because we were not really allowed due to sanctions and so on. But now they're in Europe, so none of that matters anymore.
Did they receive a paycheck from you when they arrived?
Yes, I've been. So they still have to open up bank accounts, but they open up a Revolut account, and I've been already sending them a little bit of money. Yeah, they haven't received the full amount just yet, because they have to open up bank accounts, like physical bank accounts.
So, how did you feel upon seeing them arrive? Was it at an airport where you met them? And take me to that moment.
Yeah. So I went. So Agatha, my partner, she also took a day off to go with me to Helsinki to pick them up. I had promised that I would go and like pick them up in person to just make sure that everything goes well, and at least they have someone who's European there to I don't know, just in case something happens or whatever, I can at least vouch for them or something. So we took a train ride to. We took like a 1.5 hour train ride to Helsinki. Then we got there. They landed at 1 p.m. and we got there at 1 p.m. as well. But then they were questioned for a very long time, and then we only, I was actually getting super concerned that they might send them back. But then after 2 hours, they came out, and I saw them for the first time, and yeah, it was great. It was amazing. It was a huge relief to see them, and they stayed here with us, and they slept here on the floor, on a mattress on the floor for the first night. Then I rented an Airbnb for them, just like short-term accommodation until the end of this month. Right now we're in the process of trying to sign a lease for an apartment so that they can a 1-year lease, so that they can have like a more permanent place, basically, because right now they're still staying in short-term accommodation. And I'm gonna have to repeat the entire process again on Thursday when Alireza arrives. It's probably gonna stay here at my place again for 1 night, sleeping on the mattress on the floor, him and his wife. Then we'll probably get an Airbnb for him as well. Then then we'll try to rent a flat, like sign a lease for like a flat, so that they can have more of a permanent accommodation. But yeah, I mean, it's been super challenging, but now I think the worst part is over. Well, at least for some of them. Of course, there's still people that are on their way.
Whew. You said it was great, but I mean, was that an emotional first meeting for you and them?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. For me personally, it was also a huge relief, because for this past month and a half or whatever, the time since the war started, every single day, every couple of hours, I was checking the news just to see what was going on. Because, like I said, there was a communications blackout between, in Iran, so they couldn't communicate with the outside world. And when we started seeing the military buildup in the Middle East, I actually thought about it for a brief moment there. Like in February, I thought about it. Well, maybe I should send them like a Starlink terminal, just in case like the war breaks out, and then we can at least stay in touch and so on. But actually, it is a crime to be caught with a Starlink terminal in Iran. The best case scenario is you end up in prison for 2 years. That's like your best case scenario if you get caught with a Starlink terminal. So I didn't do that. and so I didn't have any communications, right? And so I would see the news like every day. I was checking the news every day, and I was seeing like the bombing in Iran, like in Tehran specifically, where the team is from Tehran, the capital of Iran. They have an office there. They live there, and yeah, it was just getting completely bombed by Israel and the US, and I was constantly trying to check like the specific locations of where the bombs were dropping just to see if, what was getting damaged, what was not getting damaged. Just try to pinpoint exactly what could it be that they were hurt or not. Yeah, that was extremely stressful. Like of course not as stressful as actually being there and being getting bombed, but still, not knowing what was going on to them, what was happening to them was extremely concerning. And of course, now they themselves are in a similar situation, right? Where Sahan and Pardiz, they are here in Europe now. Thankfully, they have arrived, but they have a hard time communicating with their families back in Iran and their friends and so on. And another thing that's like that's tragic is that they basically had to leave everything behind. They came with like, I don't know, 3 suitcases or something like that. Like they didn't come with much stuff, with a whole lot of stuff. They barely had anything when they came. They don't have many clothes. They were not able to bring their computers because they actually had an office in Tehran where they worked, and they had desktop computers and monitors, all the whole setup basically that you'd expect from an office, and yeah, all of that stayed behind, and there are a lot of things that they weren't even able to sell or get rid of, or I don't know. It just, yeah, it's I'm still digesting the whole situation. It's still very fresh.
Yeah. I appreciate you talking with me in the middle of it. Quite a human journey here, a very individual journey. It's very disconnected when you start seeing it on TV. You don't have faces or humans or work that they're doing to attach to these things that you see, and it lets when you don't have those individuals in your mind, it ends up being very easy to sort of categorize what's happening in a in a disjointed way. Like there's no humanity attached to what is just on TV, and yeah, you've given a lot of that context today. So I appreciate all of that detail there. Thank you so much for the time, Raphael. And we'll continue this podcast with other members of your team. Talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for having me. And yes, I very much look forward to hearing your conversation with Sahand and hear about their perspective of this journey that they've made.
Why don't you tell me where you are right now?
Hey everyone, and thanks for having me. I'm sitting in an Airbnb in Salo, Finland right now, and I believe Raphael was talking to you about a week ago, and so yeah, here I am now.
Yeah, I talked to Raphael a little bit, heard a little bit about your journey from him. You're Iranian, is that right?
That's true. That's true.
And I heard you got a Vision Pro while you were in Iran. I'd like to hear a little bit about that. And I'd also like to hear about your journey into VR development. What was your first experience with virtual reality?
Sure. So it's all a very long story. So back in Iran, I used to run a mobile game studio, and a lot of the things I'm about to say about VR and mixed reality could be framed from the mindset of a ex-mobile developer. And so we had this studio back in Iran, and when the Oculus Rift came out, I'm not very good with dates, but we tried really hard to get our hands on maybe the first Oculus Rift that we found in Iran. And since then, we have been sort of waiting for the right moment to get into XR. But it was around like a year and a half ago that we saw somebody actually had a Vision Pro in Iran, which could have been maybe like the only Vision Pro at the time in Iran. And so my co-founder and I at the time at the mobile game studio, we started sort of this reverse bidding war to try to get the price down as far as we could because it's an expensive headset. But we really wanted to try it. And we managed to actually get it for a very unusually low price, around $1,500 or so. It turns out the guy got it to do some programming for it in Dubai, found it really hard and brought it back to Iran, and there was no buyers. And so, yeah, we got the headset from him. And yeah, we had been making mobile games for around 8 years or so, I think. We started in 2017. We had our own little mobile game studio. We made hyper casual mobile games. We had a large global audience. Tens of millions of people played our games. And but for me, VR is what I've always wanted to do. Well, it actually started with buying the Vision Pro. We got the Vision Pro. There was this hackathon going on. It was a Vision hack, I think. And the hardware was so expensive and the barrier of entry was so high in terms of like developing games for it that we actually got an award at that hackathon because nobody was building anything for the Vision Pro at the time. And we literally built a flower pot you could water and you had to like tend to it. It was a really simple thing and it got an award. And that's when we knew that, yeah, nobody's building anything for these headsets, the Vision Pro yet. And so that was the first thing we did. And after that, we moved on to the Meta Quest, which was like the much larger platform. If there was any money to be made, it was going to be on the Meta Quest at the time. And so we made a couple of prototypes and they didn't turn out to be good games. We play tested them with some people, and they just weren't good games. But then we tried out Not Suspicious previous game, Airspace Defender, and I was immediately like a huge fan. The whole hand tracking interaction thing and the dome, like the hemisphere, we immediately thought it lends itself really well to bringing a lot of game experiences that are typically played on a flat screen to extended reality. And we had this idea of what if we could build like a tabletop strategy game, that sort of works like a board game, which is a mix of maybe Bad North, a little bit of Thronefall, and some Kingdom Rush mixed in. And so we had this idea of building this prototype and we worked on it for 3 months and it turned out to be a lot of fun. It was like a experience that worked best in XR as opposed to like its flat screen inspirations. And what happened next was actually really incredible. It was the Persian New Year around March of last year, and I saw Raphael's co-founder's account on LinkedIn, Guillaume, and I was like, yeah, well, these guys made a game that was a huge inspiration to us. Maybe I should just message them up, show them what we're working on, get their advice on what to do next. And as luck would have it, Guillaume sent the video immediately to Raphael, and in a matter of like 1 or 2 days, Raphael came back to us with an offer to publish the game on the Quest platform. And it was fantastic. You know, at the time we had just started doing XR and it was a great opportunity to work with the guys whose game served as like the original inspiration for our current game at the time. And yeah, that's where it all started. But what followed next was like even more incredible.
Yeah, I want to get into all that here in a sec. And then you talked about Vision Pro and getting your hands on Vision Pro, and I think about the games that Raphael made and then you've made with Raphael now so much when it comes to the Vision Pro because they seem like a match made in heaven, right? They seem like the perfect apps to play on that hardware, even though there is no user base. There's no market to sell your games to. So it's this awful situation where I want to beg you to put the games on a headset that you're not going to make any money from.
Coming from mobile, our the way we look at it usually is if this thing is going to go mainstream, what kind of experiences are people going to want on their like lightweight mobile hardware headsets? And so that's where I think a lot of our experience with mobile comes into play really nicely. And so we basically frame it like this: what kind of XR experiences are people going to play on a subway ride, on a train ride? But the problem is right now the majority, I wouldn't say majority, but a large portion of the audience that we have on Quest headsets are gamers, and I would say hardcore gamers. And so the kind of game that you would play on a subway ride, they wouldn't pay for it. And so we're in this difficult situation where we got to make like very intuitive hand tracked experiences with mixed reality that cater both to the audience that currently exists for the MetaQuest hardware but at the same time can give you a glimpse into what the future of mixed reality games is going to look like. And about the Vision Pro, yeah, we would love to port our games for the Vision Pro or even make new experiences for it. But it's there's just no user base yet, and understandably, I think there's almost no other developer making games and experiences for them. Yeah, unless there's some sort of support from the hardware manufacturers for developers like us. Yeah, I think it's a suicide mission. We would like we're already operating off of our savings, because we love this space so much. We just want to be in it. We want to create. We want to make games. But to try and build something for a hardware where we know the game is not going to sell, it would be suicide.
Yeah, totally get that. Let me ask this question. How did you first hear about Airspace Defender in the first place?
Well, I think I read about it on Upload VR. Actually, I was looking at because mixed reality was really interesting to us at the time. And so there was this list of the best mixed reality experiences available for MetaQuest at the time. And Airspace Defender got really good coverage on Upload Gear. And so we saw their name everywhere and we had to try it out.
Yeah, that's what I was guessing that that might have been the case, and that's why I just wanted to ask because yeah, I would have been involved in
Yeah.
making sure that it got on that list, and it's such a powerful idea. And now I want to hear about this journey into working with Raphael directly. Tell me about this journey.
Right. So let me start off by saying that Raphael really is a saint, because he took a lot of risk working with us and he put a lot of trust in us. And, they're a US based company, not suspicious. And one of the biggest problems we had to grapple with from the very start working with them was that we couldn't do any business with them like officially. And so getting them in trouble was the last thing we wanted to do because like there are numerous sanctions against working with businesses that are based in Iran. And we didn't want to like go into that territory. Like we didn't want to get them into trouble. And so incredibly, we did this whole thing with no contract. We didn't get a single dollar from the game sales. It's practically not suspicious game. We almost like didn't exist until very recently. And after the game was finally fully released, after it came out of early access, we did want to like make it official. And so we started looking into places where we could relocate the team. And we looked at a couple places in Europe. We were considering the Netherlands and Finland. And of course, if we had a choice, then we would certainly have considered the US, but there's this whole blanket travel ban in place right now. We can't even visit. So the US wasn't an option. And we started the paperwork for Finland because like our final decision was that was the best place we could be. Like it's got a great game industry. It's a great place to live. And turns out Raphael had the exact same thing in mind. He was going to relocate to Finland. And so we started the paperwork. We got accepted. And as luck would have it, I think the war between Iran and the US broke out on a Saturday, I think. The Thursday, I think it was like 2 days before the war broke out, we were at the Finnish embassy finalizing everything for our residence permits to come to Finland. And the day after we got accepted for 1 year in Finland, and on that same Saturday, war broke out, and we got stuck in Iran for around 40 days because the borders were closed. It wasn't safe to travel, and we were just waiting for an opportunity to get out of there as soon as we could. And it was horrific. Like it was the most horrific experiences of our lives, hands down. Being in a war. Yeah, I could tell you more about it. But yeah, we as soon as there was this ceasefire, we booked our bus tickets to Armenia. We crossed the ground border from Iran into Armenia, and it was like something straight out of like a World War II movie. And we crossed, like it was raining. We crossed the ground border. We had to walk a lot. And yeah, once we were in Armenia, we stayed there for a couple of days. Then we took a flight to Istanbul and then to Helsinki. and Raphael was waiting for us in Helsinki, and he had to wait for us a little bit longer than we expected because we were questioned for a very long time at the Helsinki airport. I was questioned for an hour and a half, even though I had like a valid residence permit. I was questioned for an hour and a half. It's the Iranian passport, I guess, gets me in trouble everywhere I go. But yeah, Raphael and his partner came to pick us at the airport. We took the first train to Solo, where we are now. And yeah, things are great now. We're looking for an apartment. We're looking for office space. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. We're still discovering Finland a little bit.
How many times have you been outside of Iran before this?
Well, before this, I've been to Istanbul, Dubai, and Tokyo, but that's the only three places I've ever been.
I'm speaking with very broad strokes here. This isn't true of all Americans, but by and large, they're a very um, there's a lot of people in America that have never been outside of America, never been outside the United States. And in many cases, they've never been further than their own hometown or their home state. They maybe have a car and have gone to out of state a couple times on a trip or Disneyland or Disney World or something like that, but just not a lot of global knowledge inside the United States. We like to think that we're worldly and understand the world. If I would imagine that for a non-zero number of people listening to this podcast, they probably have not heard from an Iranian about what it was like to live through this recent war, the bombings, and what you just sort of hinted at there, this journey of leaving the country doesn't even really talk about the reality of what happened. And so I'm wondering if you can explain a little bit what it's like to people who have very little understanding of global relations, even maybe why this is happening, what it was like to be a software developer in this country as this starts happening around you.
I could start off by saying, like, until very recently, before the war broke out, Iran didn't used to be that bad a place to live in. We got really good at education. We were doing software development. We were doing cutting edge mixed reality development, and the situation wasn't that bad in Iran. And so we actually had like a very westernized lifestyle. And I think the gist of what our lives used to be about was that we just wanted to make games. I personally just wanted to make games, and Iran wasn't that bad a place to be to make games. But very recently, like there were big issues with the economy. There were a lot of protests. And the last thing that happened, the war, I mean, both of the wars, there was this 12-day war, which was horrible, but we didn't get to experience a lot of the bombings firsthand. We were fortunate to not have to experience all that stuff. But this last war, it was horrific. It was horrific. And where we were living, in, in Tehran, which is the capital of Iran. I think around half of all of the attacks were focused on Tehran. And we happened to live in a place where we didn't know this, but like it turned out that there were a lot of military facilities very close to where we were living. And so for somebody who just wants to make video games, to have the experience of like hearing rockets fly over your house and strike somewhere really close to you, like the whole ground shaking with windows on the verge of shattering. It was the single most horrific experience of my life. I never wanted to have anything to do with any of this, politics, war. We just wanted to make games. And yeah, it was really hard. It was really hard, but I'm glad we're past it now. Of course, my heart is still with my family and friends who are still back in Iran. All of Iran is right now in this big limbo where they don't know what's going to happen to them, whether this ongoing ceasefire. And like you said, to people maybe in the US or in some other calm countries around the world, the war is just something you hear about on the news. But Iran is like a nation of 90 million people, and the consequences of the war are very real. We felt the bombings, like it's horrific. Yeah, that's what I have to say about it. It was really horrific, and I never thought uh, I would be in a war situation in my life. But yeah, it happened.
I want to speak for people who just want to play games. And it's very hard to be in this space where we're talking about literally virtual reality, a place that doesn't exist except when you put on the headset. And than to have the foundations of your building shake because of decisions being made at very high levels with very large disconnects between that individual experience and very big, very big trends and decisions being made disconnected from this uh, on the ground life you're trying to live. What I try to do with my podcast and what I tried to do with my whole site, what I tried to do at Upload VR, but what I'm trying to do now is humanizing this industry and the people who make it. And I thank you so much for sharing your journey here and talking about it with me. What I was trying to hint at is I imagine that there's a fair number of people who have never heard the direct experience of someone who went through this. I thank you for sharing that and getting that experience out there so that people can
It's my
know that
pleasure.
there's actual people who experience this. One of the things that I think you didn't mention directly, but I did want to cover, you had to be out of contact with Raphael for large periods of time, right?
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true, especially in this war that's still going on. I mean, there's still no internet connection in Iran. And so on the Saturday that the war started, as soon as we saw like the first missile hitting Tehran, I I got down to my computer as fast as I could, wrote up an email to Raphael, and I said, "Yeah, it appears that Iran has been struck. I'm probably not going to have an internet access for a while, but I'll try to keep you posted." And that was it. I didn't get to talk to him for like 2 weeks after when I got just a tiny bit of internet connection, and I had a chat with him on WhatsApp for around like 10 minutes or so. And then we got cut off again. And yeah, it was really hard. It was really hard. Uh, it all worked out in the end. It all worked out in the end. We did communicate the stuff that we needed. Like we did make the arrangements that we needed to make in order to have a, like, I don't know, in order to move to Finland. That was the whole focus at the time, because we were accepted for a residence permit. It was just a matter of like logistics. When can we cross the border? When, like, which flights do we need to book? And that was it. That was all the communication we had. And of course, all the work had to stop. We had a lot of commitments to Meta, to Pico, which we couldn't deliver on. But yeah, it was what it was. We couldn't get any work done. We're past it now.
You're normally developing behind a computer, right?
We were all at the office, and we actually wanted to celebrate. We actually wanted to celebrate our being accepted for a residence permit in Finland. It was going to be our next big move. And we wanted to celebrate, and we just looked out the window. We heard something, and we looked out the window, and in the distance, we saw what was unmistakably a missile strike. And yeah, that's when we knew. That's when we knew, and yeah, all hell broke loose after that.
Whew. So the other side of this is I heard from Raphael the sort of trust, like you called him a saint, I think was the word you used. But he also used very flattering words to describe the faith that you had to put in him to sort of wait for this to come together. You had to put your trust in another developer in another country who you've never met to follow through on his promises to you. Is that the case? And how did that feel from your side to have to put all this trust in basically a lifeline outside of the country who you've never met?
It really did take a little bit of trust on our side as well. It is true what you're saying, to trust somebody whom we've never met and whom we can't have an official contract with. It did get a lot of trust. It was a two-way thing. When I try to put myself in Raphael's shoes, working with a group of people in Iran, I wouldn't know how I would have reacted had I been in his shoes. And he stuck with us, through a thick and thin. Like you said, there were these whole big periods of time where we were like absolutely disconnected, and he just had to hope and put his trust in us that we would come back and continue the work. And I never had any reservations about whether to trust him or not. We just clicked from the start, and that was an incredible thing.
Let's get back to what you're hoping for out of the VR space and headsets. What are you working on now and what do you want to see in VR in the future?
Well, there are a couple of things that we didn't get around to doing for Banners and Bastions that we're about to get to now. I think we're gonna keep working on it for around a month or two. And there's this whole and yeah, this is actually a very funny thing that Airspace Defender, which served as the original inspiration for Banners and Bastions, we are going to get to work on it now. We're going to be the team working on it, and we're going to get it to full release, and then we're going to do a full Pico port for it. So once we're done with that, we were already, like before the war happened, we were already prototyping some new ideas, which I'm excited to share with you, but maybe I shouldn't. But yeah, as soon as we're done with Airspace Defender and Banners and Bastions, which is going to be in the next 2 to 3 months, we have some exciting ideas to work on. And yeah, I think we're going to try a multiplayer experience. That's as far as I can share.
Well, goodness. Yeah, multiplayer is always a big lift. So good luck to you on that one. And that's really interesting to hear full circle there on Airspace Defender. When I started to hear about this story of you making this journey out of Iran and the war that's happening there and bombs destroying large areas of the country, and then thinking about this game, Airspace Defender, Missile Command, it's very hard to sort of keep all these ideas in my head, right? Here's this game that is a fictional depiction of what you're actually experiencing. In a very real way, and it's very interesting to hear that you're going to be working on that, and I can't wait to see the updates there. The VR market is such a weird place here. It's going to take, I think, years to go by for us to kind of look back and understand what was being built during this period. There's a lot of negativity out there right now, a lot of assumptions that this market is dead, that it was almost a mistake. You go to mainstream press, and it's like you've been trying to make something happen that hasn't happened for a decade now, is the way it looks, and it's like there's plenty of people out there that kind of want to jump on a bandwagon and say, "Ha ha ha! This market, like VR, is never going to happen. If it hasn't happened so far, it's never going to happen." But there's very real things that kind of affect individual developers like yourself and Raphael. The whole Horizon Worlds push, it was really tough to go to like MetaConnect and speak to the person who's in charge of mixed reality efforts, who's got that title of being in charge of everything, and to interview them and like ask them the question, do you see a problem with there being both Horizon Worlds being promoted and individual developers who have made paid games? And hear this, very, I don't know, level-headed corporate speak back at me where it's just like, no, I don't see a problem with that. I see a place where both of these things can exist. And to just know that that's BS, like to know in my heart, like, come on, man, be
Yeah.
real about it. Like, you're it's like the slow motion train wreck to watch from afar, where it's like, no, you're pushing slop in front of real developers who have put their lives on the line in order to ship these projects. And there was a period there for a couple of years where Meta had a robust release schedule. There were 2 to 4 games coming out every week, and every one of them was well thought out and carefully sort of vetted to make sure it was good.
Yeah.
Then they just sort of ripped that out of the strategy and pushed everything out onto the store and stopped doing that, stopped promoting this incredible work. And so, like, there was another pass there where Airspace Defender and Banners and Bastions ended up on the release calendar and gave you sort of a target to shoot for, a date to make, and make sure all your bugs are out by, a month before release, make sure all your bugs are free and you're ready for 1.0 release. And like that was for a while there were devs making hiring decisions and able to grow their studios because they had that reliability of a game console that was actually like caring about its dev community and really supporting them. Now, bringing that back to present, right? Like I see this rebuilding period happening where it seems like the platforms are still there and supporting good devs to some extent, but we haven't seen the products that are going to come on the other side of this. We don't know the price ranges that we're going to hit. Meta has been so stuck in this place where they need to ship something between $200 and $600. They only ever shipped one headset that was outside that price range, and it did not do well. So there's all this frustration and confusion amongst people who are like, "Wait, if it's priced $1,000, I'm not interested." Even though, there's gonna be a lot of people who are gonna be very interested if the product is really good. There's a lot of opportunity here for really neat things to happen in the next couple of years in the VR space, but it's hard for people to see it right now because there's just sort of like I think the deals are getting made now, and the hardware is not getting shipped yet to many people, so they can't see sort of that there's a light at the end of the tunnel here for quality hardware and great experiences to have on that quality hardware. So I do
Right.
think of your stuff that you're working on as stuff to watch, as projects that we want to see hit on this new hardware in a really
Thank you.
meaningful way. Is there anything else about your journey that you want people to hear about today?
Well, of course, there's a lot more I could say, but I think I did cover most of what I wanted to say. But about the last thing you mentioned about the state of the industry right now, the way we see it is that until the end of 2026, when there are a couple of new headsets that are going to come out, we just want to hold on for dear life. You know, we're trying to get all the funding we can. We're trying to work as closely we can with the hardware manufacturers so that we can get our hands on their dev kits, you know, the early versions of the hardware they're currently making. And but yeah, we're still firm believers in the inevitability of an XR future. We just hope that there's not going to be another XR winter between now and when XR is going to be mainstream.
You brought out another dev. Is that right? That another dev followed you after you guys made it? You waited for them to make it there as well?
It's true. It's true. They came here a week after we got here, and yeah, we're all just settling in at the moment. But yeah, starting on May 1st, I think we're gonna have our office, and yeah, work can officially start again.
If you had an unlimited budget and could make anything you'd want, what would you make in VR?
All right, so this is something we've been talking about a lot with Raphael. I'm a big fan of dungeon crawlers and roguelikes, and I played a lot of Diablo, and we had this if we had unlimited budget, then we would for sure make a multiplayer dungeon crawler where people can sit around the table, at least virtually, and go around killing monsters, building out their own characters, experiencing these stories, looting stuff, you know, the whole dungeon crawler experience. And so yeah, if we had unlimited budget, that would be the next thing we could do.
I want to hear a specific memory you had in VR, your favorite sort of moment in headset. If it isn't your favorite moment or you can't think of it offhand, you get like too much pressure trying to think of that one best. Just describe for me a moment where you felt like you were in virtual reality and you felt completely immersed and felt present in that other space.
I remember that there was this, and it's a shame that I don't remember the name of this thing, but there was this space simulation experience where you could jump on a spaceship and go like fly to different planets and like explore space. And I remember there was this moment uh, where I was flying close to the sun, and I remember like just seeing how massive it was and how small I was, and just knowing that this was an experience that could only happen in VR.
Ti
Yeah, I remember
Titans of
I
Space
actually
by chance?
cried. What was that again?
Titans of
What's
Space
that?
by chance?
Yeah, yeah, Titans of Space. Yes, yes, yes. That's it. That's it. Yeah, Titans of Space. Yeah, and I remember in that moment, I like tears came to my eyes, and yeah, I thought to myself, yeah, this is an experience that I could only have in VR, and yeah, I'll never
Yeah.
forget it.
I love it. And yeah, what a beautiful way to close this out. That experience is one of my favorites. It comes with my highest recommendations for the medium. If you haven't tried Titans of Space, it's pure magic. And Sahand here just describing the exact same thing that has wowed me about this medium for many, many years. If you ever go look at a textbook about space exploration, you'll usually find like a page in the middle of the book where they'll show the scale of the solar system and they'll have all the different planets to scale with one another. And you'll see how big Jupiter is next to Earth. You'll see how tiny it is. And they're like, this is how big Jupiter is in comparison to Earth. And then off on the right side of the page, you'll see the sun, and it'll be cut off on the page because there's simply no way to represent how big the sun is in comparison to the Earth and Jupiter in a textbook. But you get into Titans of Space and you might have tears rolling down your eyes, just like Sahan described, within 10 seconds of putting it on. And you look in front of you and you see our little planet there. You see the moon floating around it. And then you turn your head to the right and you see the sun and you see how enormous it is. And if you don't believe in this medium, or if you've never tried this medium before, you try something like Titans of Space, and your brain will open, your mind will open to the idea that there's simply nothing else like it, right?
Yeah, very true. Couldn't agree more.
Well, thank you for the time, Sahan, for sharing your story, and
Thanks
good
for
luck
having
there in
me.
Finland.
This has been great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I guess I'll be talking to you again, hopefully
Yeah,
soon.
let's.
Sure.
Sounds great. All right, I'll talk to you later. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you.